right. Here's the song. If you'd like to be the boss of your own television program, then listen to the Showrunner Show.
I like it. Nice and simple. Flair.
Nick, I'm hoping you'll add like a little slide whistle at the end, like whoop, or like some sort of. I was picturing it going tackety tack, tackety tack, tackety tack. Woo! If you'd like to be the boss, but I just my pitch was bad when I did that.
It's good.
Sure,
How many rewrites do you do on those before you perform them?
I put it in my voice memos, and usually about 5. Usually about 5 iterations when I do it, and it's all, I meditate every morning. So Thursday morning, my meditation is usually just coming up with the zippy intro songs.
And it just comes to you.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, nice.
The goal is, as long as you don't have to have high quality, you know what I mean? As long as it doesn't have to be good, there's no problem. There can always be something new.
Still, you could give me, a week to come up with one, and I would struggle. So I don't know how you.
It'd be a
Sounds like a
special
challenge.
It'd be a special pain.
Maybe you guys do need to do that for one podcast. I think
there's
you
certain
might need
things
to try.
that like make me almost have instant panic attacks, and if I had to do an intro song, that would be
Drew,
one of those.
Drew left me a happy birthday message once years ago, like decades ago. Drew called me and he was leaving like a voice message, and he must have realized partway through that he was singing because he went, "Happy birthday to you." And then it just started.
That sounds right. Yeah, that sounds right. Well, everyone, welcome to the Showrunner Show, where every week we demystify some aspect of the job of showrunning for anyone who works in TV, who wants to work in TV, or just wants to know how it's all made. I'm Drew Dowdle.
I'm John Eric Dowdle.
And I'm Stacy Shabosky. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really glad that you're here.
This week we're talking about best practices for working with an editor with Richard Fox. We've worked with Richard now on two seasons of TV, and Rich is like the killer. Like when his episodes show up, you're like, great, I have to do nothing. This is amazing. And he has a special gift for helping navigate episodes, whatever shape they show up in, to like something that sparkles. And so, yeah, super excited to hear how he does this.
Yeah,
I just came up with a song for you, Rich. What does Richard Fox say? Cut, 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 intercut, cut, intercut. Cut, 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 intercut.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And just for
was
clarity,
beautiful.
too, your credit is Rich Fox, right? Do you go by Rich Fox as a credit in case anyone wants to look you up?
I go by Rich Fox.
Rich Fox. Okay, great, because I know there's probably a
little
lot
more
of
casual.
A lot of Richard Foxes out there, so in case anyone was looking you up, I just want to make that clarification.
If my name were
yeah,
Richard, I would definitely go with Rich. In the whole Rick, Ricky, Richard, Dick. I mean, maybe part of me kind of would want to choose Dick because that's amazing. But Rich is the way to go.
I had the dick phase in maybe 7th grade. There was
Did you? Oh, that's great.
I didn't appreciate it at the time, but now I'm like, bring it on, Like, why do people not call me that? What's wrong?
How did that go for you?
Little Dicky Fox.
Bold choice for 7th grade.
I don't
It wasn't my
get the feeling it was
choice.
self-chosen.
It was
Yeah.
given to me, but if I could do it over again, I would. If I could do it over again, I would embrace it. Yes, I would embrace it.
Got it.
Yep.
Well, we were just talking before we recorded. Maybe we could just talk about, we're just coming out of that long WGA strike, still in a, actor strike. But we were just talking about, I think it's kind of an interesting detail, Rich, that we're asking, were you able to stay busy during the strike? And, were you able to, get some work? Because, most production jobs have been totally idle. Most, it's an interesting, phase for a lot of people in post-production of what kind of work you can pick up. Can you share with us again kind of what pivot you were able to make during this time to keep the lights on?
Yeah, because it's been a scary time because I did have a job when the strike happened, but every day there were, picketers at the location, and every day we didn't know if we were going to work the next day, and that was really terrifying. And then the day came when, we had to pause production, and you think, well, what am I going to do the rest of the year? So luckily for me, I used to work in reality TV, and some of the people that I used to work with are still on the same show. I used to work on The Bachelor, and they just happened to need some more editors because they are doing The Golden Bachelor now, which is 71-year-old bachelor. So it's been kind of fun. It's like a show people are talking about. I walk down the street and the bus will pass me and there's the Golden Bachelor on the side of the bus. So it's kind of a trip, and it's been a good thing to like keep me busy, you know, keep my mind engaged and just keep thinking about editing. Because when I don't edit for 3 months, 4 months, and I land on a show, like it takes time, you know, for those muscles to go back. I don't know if you guys feel the same way about writing, but like there's a lot of momentum and, you know, a mental state that goes into it. And it's hard to have that much downtime and get right back to it. So yeah, it's been a good diversion for me.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that show's everywhere too. It's pretty great.
And it's interesting, like how much, you know, of editing applies to different things. You know what I mean? It's like storytelling is storytelling. Sometimes I think, oh, when I used to do reality TV, that was so different. But it's like you're really still talking about scenes and characters, you know, and there's a lot of crossover in these different crafts. And, you know, different things I've done have made me, I think, a better editor in scripted TV, you know, whether it's working in reality TV documentaries or some of the time I spent writing. You know, I think those things all contribute to being a better editor.
The final draft of the script happens in editorial, and you know, it's really the editor. Like a great editor can help you see things with fresh eyes and point things out that, you know, you may not need this scene after, you know, years of developing it and, you know, and torturing it and seeing what you can do without. You know, it's often the editor that really like helps you see it, you know, anew.
Yeah, it amazes me how many times that comment comes out of like, you know, do you need this scene at all? You know, an editor will say that. It's like, of course we need it, you know. It's a great scene and it's been in the, you know, on the page forever. And then you think about it, you're like, do we learn anything new here? Do we, you know, actually, do we need it? And it's an interesting part of the process where those scenes that aren't necessary really become so clear. Only in editorial. Somehow it's like a magic phase of the process that those, you know, things become, that clarity really comes through.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I was thinking about your podcast and what would you say to like a showrunner that maybe wasn't comfortable working with editors that hadn't maybe done it before. And I would maybe say, well, think of the editor not that much different than you think about your writers. You know, it's part of the same team of storytellers that are, you know, helping produce this story and this episode, and talk to us the same way you would talk to people on your writing staff. You know, we still speak the same language of story and narrative and characters and performances is, you know, where it moves into a different realm, but it's still very similar. You know, we don't speak like a special language as editors. It's not really a technical craft. You know, it's the same creative process that you guys are going through when you're writing.
Yeah, 100% agree.
I'm surprised to hear you call it not a technical craft. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's right hand in hand with the director, honestly. You know, it seems, you know, in terms of crafting performance and, you know, like you said, it's almost part of your writing staff, like really, you know, editors like yourself, Rich, that like really have such a strong sense of story and strong sense of performance like that. That really is the best talent you can have as an editor, in my opinion, is performance and story more than it is anything technical. I agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the part of editing that people like don't really understand. Even a lot of showrunners that I've, you know, worked with, is how much of the performances, you know, how important part of our job that is, crafting those performances. You know, people don't really realize that nobody else will ever have the opportunity to watch every take of every scene. There's not time. The director doesn't have time in 4 days, and you guys don't have time either. We can go pinpoint into a scene and say, okay, show me every take of this line, or maybe there's a scene that's really a big problem and we just want to work through it together. But no one else will see every take of every scene. And that is like a responsibility that I take really seriously, you know, because I know that I have that knowledge and I need to like bring that out in every time. When as soon as I start working on dailies, you know, that process starts of taking it so seriously. You know, that the performances are so important. You know, giving a baseline of an editor's cut that has good performances to me is the most important thing that I'm doing. That's the thing I'm most proud of to bring to it. Yeah.
So you're not just out of, I mean, we have this whole list of awesome questions. I feel like I'm jumping over it, but so it's not that you're just like, wow, there were 4 setups for this scene. That one was beautiful. That setup. So you're not necessarily thinking of the beauty of the setups or the visual beauty of the total thing. It's more like finding those great performances.
Right. To me, I'm thinking of visually as like a secondary part of the process. I'm going into putting a scene together for the first time, first I'm looking at the script again and making sure I really understand like the story that we're trying to tell and the story that you guys put on paper. And then I'm really focused on the performances more than anything, just like what grabs me, what sucks me in, what makes me emotional. What are those moments in the performance that are really selling that story? I just try to lose myself in those performances. And that almost tells me what to do. I try to turn off like the intellectual part of my brain and just like feel the scene. And if the performances are good, that's so much fun to do, because it just draws me in. And that's what pulls me through, because you can get lost in those decisions, right? Like there's so many setups and takes and what do I do? And I find if I stay focused on the performances, it guides the decisions for me much easier. And then as a second pass, I'll think visually more, right? Like, okay, am I mixing in the wide shot enough? Do we have a perspective on where we are? What's the most interesting way to come into a scene? So I will do a visual pass, but like I said, it's almost like a second pass.
Cool.
Yeah, that's such an awesome process. Like that really shows, like that's, I think when we watch an editor's cut, that's the one thing that, if the performances feel great, we're like, wow, this episode's in great shape. Maybe it's a little long. Maybe we can pace it up here a little bit. You always have thoughts, but like if the performances feel great, you feel great about the episode. And that really is, it trumps everything, truly.
Let's just jump back and give a broad overview of the TV editorial process. Like, so you get dailies. Will you talk us through sort of the kind of big steps on the way from getting dailies to final cut?
Sure. Yeah. Sometimes, because of budgets, I don't start until maybe the day before they're shooting my episode. So on my own time, I've read the scripts and, had some conversations. So I have some clue what's going on. And then the dailies start coming in pretty fast. And it's our job to keep up with camera. So what you shoot on Monday, I'll edit on Tuesday. And it's a first pass of the scenes. It's rough, but, I have to at least try to do a first pass on that scene or I'll just get too far behind, because when shooting stops, then I have 3 days to put together what's called the editor's cut. And, I take it really seriously, delivering a really good editor's cut with sound and sound design. And you guys know I work with a great assistant, Brian, who does an amazing job with sound. And we really want to deliver that to the director so they can, be sucked into the story and feel like, oh, I'm going on a journey watching this. So again, time in TV is everything. You just never have enough time. So you have 3 days for that editor's cut. Then you work with the director for about 4 days. And then you turn it into the showrunners typically. And then, I don't know, I'd say it's maybe about 2 weeks that you guys have, a week to 2 weeks before then the studio's going to want to see it, and then the network's going to want to see it, and then you just go through this process of a variety of cuts, finally landing on picture lock, which usually doesn't mean you're completely finished with picture, but let's say you're 98% finished with picture, then you can turn it over to the sound department, and then maybe we have a sound spotting where we all talk about it, and the composer comes in and listens to my temp music and decides, okay, based on this, I kind of want to go in this direction, with the score. You've got sound people working in another location, fixing the dialogue, working on the sound design, and then we all land together in the sound mix, and then everything looks and sounds great, and then we're finished.
For a point of context too, just for point of comparison with movies, that's one thing that, being guys that came from movies and then later into TV, it was always kind of mind blowing, the speed of post in TV. In movies you wrap the show and then you have a 2-week editor's cut and then you have a 12-week director's cut.
Right.
Where TV, 4-day director's cut. And I mean, you're basically turning over the studio after, between the editor's cut, director's cut, and showrunner cut, in just over 2 weeks. It's really, and a movie's 90 minutes and a TV show's, just under 60 minutes. So it's not that different in length of content. So it's really just a crazy speed.
One of the upsides is it kind of beats the, our innate, perfectionistic streak of like, let's add a couple frames here. No, let's take those back out. Let's try this.
Right.
Like you're just like kind of running for your life, and it sort of beats that perfectionism out of you, or you just die. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you deal with that? Like,
right.
You're going through all the dailies, you're making cuts of scenes every day, like, do you have to just stay really intuitive and just keep
Right.
moving? Like, how do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, that was very overwhelming at first, right? The idea of the speed and having to keep up. And I don't know, at some point you just learn to like trust your instincts. And usually your first instincts are amongst your best instincts, you know? And yeah, you'll get a lot of feedback along the way and a lot of great ideas that will make it better, you know, things that I couldn't see in that short amount of time. But, you know, you just have to learn to trust those instincts and just go with it. There's no time to do anything different. If you overthink it or if you get stuck on like one part, you're ignoring all the other parts that you won't have time to get to. So yeah, part of it is just keep moving. And it's like, I don't know, assume it's the same sometimes with writing, that you just have to get that first draft written quickly, right? Get something down on paper. So then you have something to read. And then you have something to rewrite. And a lot of times I'll approach a scene the same way. Just get something down, just get a version out. Because then maybe I'll watch it the next day and then I'll have something to look at. And I'll say, okay, reacting to this, you know, now I could see how to shape this scene a little better, or a different point of view I can attach to it. So I think just keep moving and don't think too much, you know, is a good way to look at it. And then I feel like, you know, big picture, there ultimately is enough time to get to everything. You just have to sort of trust in the process. Like if I don't have time to try something and maybe the director doesn't, but at some point along the process, something on an episode that needs work, a scene or a story, at some point we're going to get there.
Yeah.
And that's important to just trust that like you guys are going to watch it and you're, you know, really good at saying, okay, this is what's working, this is what's not working. Let's hone in on these areas that aren't working. So knowing that I trust you guys, it makes it easier for me, right? Just to like, okay, there's some things I have to let go at this phase.
Yeah.
Knowing ultimately everything will be addressed, hopefully.
Yeah.
And usually it is.
In scripts, I fill that in with XXX, like, because you can get bogged down. You can be like, I mean, you can get sucked into a vortex where you're on one sentence for 2.5 hours, and that's not good for anyone. So I do a lot of like, XXX, and that means, you know, go back to it. Then at the end, I go back to the top of the script, I do a splat F and look for those XXXs. If I'm lucky, there's like 3, and if I'm unlucky, there's like 45. And I'm like, oh.
Damn.
But you get through
you
it.
get
You know,
through
I do versions of that too, like brackets. I'm like, fill in the scene here. Like, you know, I don't have a good description for a, you know, a thing, or like I don't want to go on Google and find out how this process works or whatever, you know, and I'll just sort of fly over that.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, to that point too, I think one thing I've had to learn in TV is that it doesn't have to be perfect on your director's cut. It doesn't have to be perfect on your showrunner's cut. If a scene is not a problematic scene, you know, John, you always tell me this too, like, we'll have more licks at this. We'll have more licks at this. You know, you don't have to get all your licks in every single delivery, and just knowing like this scene's working. There's a few things in my brain that I think we can do a little bit better, but we'll have another chance to do it. And we don't have to, you know, torture every detail on every cut, because you just will never get it done and you'll never get it in. And that's been a hard thing, you know, to kind of accept, I think, to kind of, you know, just roll with it more. And it's a little more jazz, a little bit more loose, but ultimately I think really good, like you're saying, like you really have to rely on those first instincts and be okay letting things go too. And I think that's really helpful in TV. And you know, the perfectionism does get, you know, beat down, which is nice.
I gotta say, season 1 of Pickett, Drew and I had this workflow at the end of season 1. We're like, okay, we like, I feel like we're working, like doing too much. And it was like, I would work on a script and then give it to Drew, and then he'd give me notes, and then I'd do the notes, and then Drew would work on a script and then give it to me, and I'd give him, like, and we were creating like double the drafts of everything, like every step along the way. And we learned to be like, hey, you know, not just trust ourselves, but like trust the process. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'll read it, you know, with the studio when Drew's ready, you know, as opposed to me creating a whole second draft in the middle of it, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And that's been really helpful. Some of that.
Yeah. And in
you know,
editorial, to that point, like we were both doing every cut, both of it just, and then like, you know, we decided, you know, if I was directing an episode, for example, I would do the director's cut, and then John would just do the showrunner cut. I wouldn't even look at it. It goes in, and I would just know in my head, like if John did anything, like took anything out that I love and want to bring back, like I'll have a chance to, you know, it'll still be open. The episode will still be open for a while, and there's still time, and just kind of letting go of that, having to see every change and sign off on absolutely everything, because it's just impossible.
I have a kind of an internal workflow question for you, Rich, which is, it sounds like you take it very seriously. You're there from the beginning and you're very intuitive. So I'm wondering if it's one of those things where when you're on an episode, does it sort of eat into your, okay, by the way, I just went to a women's retreat, fairy tale and dream incubation weekend. So this question is coming from this, but does it sort of infiltrate? Is it the kind of thing where you like wake up in the morning and the first thing you're thinking about is ideas for the episode, and you're brushing your teeth and you're thinking about the episode, and like as you're falling asleep at night or in the middle of the night when you wake up, like it's kind of always, is it like that where it's always there? Or are you one of those people who's like, it's 6:30, it's dinner time, I've got a life, it's done, my mind shuts off?
Right. It kind of builds to that, what you're saying. Like, as I build towards doing my editor's cut, I get more and more immersed, because that 3 days is so intense, and I have to be in such like a creative place that I almost just submit to it, all the time. Like you said, when I wake up, when I go to sleep, I'm thinking about it when I'm walking around, taking breaks. But that will burn you out over the long run, right? So, the good thing about my position is, then there's times when I get to relax a little bit and say, okay, now the director is kind of coming in with their perspective. You guys are coming in with your perspective, So then there's times when I'm kind of leading the charge and, let myself go all the way there. And then there's other times when I can kind of take a step back and realize, okay, now I'm following a little bit more, still supporting, still bringing ideas, but following a little bit more. So it kind of has a nice ebb and flow to it.
I like that. Yeah. That's nice.
That is nice. I can't tell you how many times with Rich I would have like a moment where I'd see your editor's cut and I'd be like, oh, that's a really good take of that moment and I love it. It's really good. But I remember there was a better one. I remember, I was there that day and there's another one that's even better. Let's find it, and then you go dig it up and then, sure enough, the one you selected is actually better. It's funny how your memory from the day is often a little off, and the editor is like the truly objective judgment on all of the material, and every time I think, oh wait, no, but I remember there's something better, I'm almost 100% wrong, and it's just
cool. One of the advantages that we have is that we do have fresh eyes. When I look at a scene, I don't know any of the backstory. I don't know what went wrong. I don't know who was sick that day. I don't know what arguments you guys had with the network over what the scene was supposed to be. And sometimes I feel with showrunners, they're bringing a lot of like past, issues into the cut, like almost working through problems that I don't always see. I'm like, well, I think this performance is good. I know you guys didn't get along, or, it wasn't what you thought it was going to be, but objectively for me, it's working. So
that's it.
That doesn't mean that, that's right and that we shouldn't try to make it what the original intent was, because sometimes that's important to do, is make it back to the original intent, but it's still helpful to get my perspective too, that like, well, this is working on its own, and that's another way to go, is to embrace just what it is,
Yeah.
That's one of my like Post-its, is surrender to what is. Like,
right.
Some days you show up and it's raining and it's supposed to be a picnic scene, but it's raining and you're like, I guess we're shooting the scene in the car, or whatever. And it's interesting for us, from the showrunning side, like often, the director had a slightly different take on, this intimate scene is now a walk and talk, or like certain things are just different than how we imagined it, in the writer's room, or pitched it internally, or how the, writer's room decided the scene was going to be this kind of a thing. But then the director and the actor sort of took it in this direction on the day. And then to see that in the cut, there's just all these things that are, for me, I'll speak for myself. For me personally, like, okay, that's different than I imagined, but does that make it wrong or just different?
Right.
You know what I mean? And that can be a real process, for me, just sorting through like, okay, I didn't visualize it this way, but it actually might be better. I just have to let my brain catch up to the difference, if that makes sense.
It makes sense to me. I would think from your standpoint, it would be challenging to see something that's different in so many ways. I would think you almost need to watch it twice to like have the first reaction of like, wait, what's this? What's that? And then the second time, maybe you can just see it for what it is. Yeah. And I know from an editorial standpoint, it's one reason why like knowing you're having that experience, and even the director who shot the episode is somewhat having that experience, like wanting it to be so polished, is so hopefully you can get lost in a little bit and just go on the narrative journey, right? And have like a genuine experience with the story that's there and see the problems that are there, not like what you were expecting. Try to increase the odds that you can kind of get lost in it. Because then there's new problems that like you didn't think you were going to have. And then when you watch it objectively, you're like, well, I was worried about all these other things. Actually, the problem's over here,
Yeah.
And the quicker we can get to that and to like see what we're actually, dealing with, the better, I think.
What are some things you wish that every showrunner knew about editorial? Like oftentimes, a lot of showrunners, I assume a lot of showrunners, especially, new in their showrunning journey, may have never been in post before, maybe came up as writers and haven't really spent time in editorial. What are some things like, I assume you've experienced all kinds, like, people who are very experienced in editorial and people who don't have a language for it yet. What are some things you wish showrunners knew when they came into editorial?
Yeah, it's a great question because I can tell obviously when showrunners are a lot more experienced, and for example, they do kind of things that you guys are saying you had along your journey, which is like they're able to let go of details earlier in the process, right? Like I think it's so important when you first watch a cut to think like really big picture and really communicate like at a very top level, like what about the story is working and what is not working, right? And to not just send an email with specific notes, but to really like have a conversation about what was the experience of watching this episode and how did I feel, and what do I want to feel and what am I missing when I watch this episode? Again, just really relate to it from a very like narrative standpoint, because I find like some showrunners that haven't had as much editing experience kind of get lost in like these details of like this edit's not working, or this transition is a little bit off. And those are the things that we're ultimately going to get to, right? But not the thing that we should be talking about at first. So that would be one thing I would say.
Do you find, best practices like if, so a showrunner or a director like watches the first cut, is it most helpful to get more kind of broad notes? Like I feel like, I wanted the scene or this episode to play a little tenser. Is that more helpful than the little minutia, and maybe doing the first pass is just very broad, general thoughts, and then drilling down as time goes on?
Yeah, like what you said is a great note. Like I wish this episode would play tenser, like that's so helpful to me because a lot of times we don't know that, it's like sometimes episodes are supposed to be very tense, and sometimes it's not about that, and so just hearing that just tells me, okay, what was the intent of this episode? It was to create tension, it was to make the character feel so tense that, they're going to crack at some point or they're going to do something wrong, that they shouldn't do, but because of the tension. And we need the audience to feel that tension and really understand that tension. Like those are great overall notes that are so helpful to me because I can take one note like that and filter through like the whole episode. I can apply it to every scene. I can rethink the temp music that I had in there, based.
Dun, 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 dun. Put that on everything.
There you go. That sometimes it's
about what you do.
Sometimes it's the last option that I got, but I try to not have it be the first option that I have. It's like usually it's like done.
Do the digital push in. Like we once had an actor who was just like, just nothing, giving us nothing, and we're like, we just added some like score and did a push in, and everyone's like, wow, that performance was amazing.
Exactly.
It's like there was nothing
Computer
happened.
generate like a twinkle in the eye.
I mean, to that point, it is incredible what you can do. Like, it's incredible how you could say, I want this episode to feel hilarious and, lighthearted. And then you could say, I want this episode to feel like super tense. And you could literally take the same footage and create two totally different episodes. I mean, it ceases to blow my mind how much you can manipulate an episode in editorial. It's really magic. It's magic.
There's so much you can do to shape the tone, right, of a scene, of an episode. And to your previous question, it's like, what do I kind of wish, showrunners knew or thought about? It's just like communicating those things are so important. As editors, a lot of times we don't get that information.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're the last to like hear something about a story or an idea or what's the episode about. And so being included in all that from an earlier stage is really helpful, because if I'm like trying to hit the same points in the same tone, it's so helpful. We're just going to get there faster. Now, we might change along the way, or we might make different decisions as we go, but it's still really nice to be included in those conversations and, really, again, just communication. I think a lot of times there's not enough communication with editors. We're kind of working in a vacuum, and people feel like, well, we'll have time to have those conversations later. But then what you've done is you've lost all this time that an editor's been working on the episode, and it could have been more productive time. It could have been more efficient time if we already had some of that information and we didn't just wait until we got into producer's cut to like learn some of those things.
Are you ever invited or even permitted? Because one thing we talk about a lot on the show is that there's just such a hierarchy of etiquette in who's allowed to communicate what to whom, If you say, for example, that you're supposed to cut something together that's supposed to be funny. So you'd like to, for example, have a lot more reaction shots. This is something that obsesses me because, anyway, you need more stuff with faces because faces are funny and you need to be able to cut to them. Are you able to say like, hey, director, or hey, showrunner, or whatever, like, I could use a little more of this, or opposite, I could use more swishy camera motion because, boy, this is what I'm seeing is really static and you want something exciting and thrilling. Are you allowed to say that, or would that be considered like no, rude, or does it vary show to show? I'm just wondering, is the communication in pre-production and production a one-way street where people just tell you stuff, or can you reverse it?
Right. It's a little hard as an editor to give too much feedback at an early stage, you know what I mean? Because then you're stepping on the director's toes and you're not involved in all the conversations, so it's hard to interject yourself when you don't know everything that's being said or what's already been planned. So it's at that stage, it's more helpful for me just to like listen to conversations. Sometimes a tone meeting will be recorded because maybe they don't want an editor on the call, because it's too many people talking. But sometimes I get to listen to them later, and that's helpful just to hear that, and ingest that information. And then in terms of feedback, it's almost like depends on the director, because that, is an interesting relationship with the editor too, because some directors don't communicate with us until their director's cut, but some directors will call us before they start shooting. And we'll call throughout production, and we'll call at the end of their day to vent to me. And that's cool too, because then I'm getting, again, more information. And sometimes they do want feedback. Sometimes directors will say like, how is this performance going? What do you think? Or, how is the coverage here? And please let me know if I miss something. And then, I just have to be careful because I don't know the director that well. So I don't want to be critical. I don't want to seem like I'm criticizing them, but like if I feel like there's something they really need to hear and they're open to that communication, then I will share that, or maybe I'm missing something. Maybe they had a plan and I just didn't get it. And me asking that question, they could say, oh no, we've got this. We're going to do X, Y, Z. So that communication with the director during production can be really helpful and gives me sometimes a little bit of a voice to give some feedback.
That's really smart.
Recording the tone meeting and saying
I know,
that
I'm like
is a
taking
brilliant
notes.
idea. Like we're immediately going to adopt
and I'm
that.
definitely guilty
so
of not
good.
talking to the editor too much ahead of time, as far as, what's important in the scene, what's not, like I'm clocking that now myself and saying like, I need to be more communicative with the editor earlier and not just wait for a cut and give notes, like you can probably hit the ground running a lot better if, just even the intention, the tone. Yeah. Like you said, John, the tone meeting, the tone of each scene and if that's communicated beforehand, that can make a huge difference.
I think it helps. And you guys are so busy, right? It's like, I know talking to the editor can be the last thing you have time for when you're shooting next week. It's like on your priority level, obviously shooting next week is more important than a cut you're going to have to deal with like in a month or two, right? But like just a little bit amount of time goes a long way, I would say, in communicating with editors. It doesn't have to be that much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It sounds actually like maybe some people use you as a therapist, and maybe that's not the most ideal.
That could happen. I don't mind, though. I don't know. It's kind of nice to hear some stories from set because we don't get to hear this stuff. Sometimes it's nice, just to like be included in some gossip. I don't really mind that.
Oh, good.
Sometimes directors, in the director's 4 days, sometimes the first half a day is just them venting because they haven't had anyone, they haven't had someone they can cry to, or to say, in this scene I wanted to do this and I didn't get to because of XYZ. And it's actually, again, it's useful time for us to kind of like form our connection, because 4 days is a very short amount of time to like establish a connection to someone and be able to collaborate. So it's actually can be helpful just to like share some stories.
I definitely use the editor as a bit of a therapist at points too, especially when it's like, it was raining and we only had a chance to do this one big thing, one take. Like, please tell me it's good enough. Please tell me you can make this work and it's not terrible. Like, even if you think it's terrible, just tell me it's not. It's all I got.
Lie to me,
Lie to me.
I know. Editorial is really like a speed therapist, like intensive therapy. It's like you got 4 days to get all your therapy in, and I think too, like there's like Drew and I like to say like there's the thing you intended to shoot, but that's never what you end up with. You know what I mean? And so there's a death process to the thing you meant to shoot. And then there's like this new process of finding like, well, okay, what do we have and what is the best version of what we have, versus what we intended. Because like, even when we're directing, like, I'll speak for myself. When I'm directing, it's never like, I'm like, oh, this is so much better in my head, and you have to sort of let that vision die so that you can find what the thing really wants to be, not what you are trying to will from your original intent. And that process can be really emotionally, in our first number of movies, like it became like a cycle. I would call Stacy and like, I fucked this up. I'm never going to work. The first 2 weeks of editorial, I'd be like, oh my God, I fucked this up so bad. Like, they're going to kill me. Like, this is horrible. I don't know. Like, and she'd be like, yeah, just give it a couple weeks, calm down.
We have young children. Figure it out.
And,
I'm still not. I don't make any money at all.
Wow. No pressure.
No pressure. Yeah.
No pressure.
No pressure. But then slowly you pick away at it, and you have, and for me, it was always that death process of letting go of the thing you intended, and then finding like, okay, now that I've let go of that original intent, like what does this actually want to be, and how do I support it in this being not what I want, but what it wants, and the editor, like, is such a key part of that, like. When you were saying earlier, like, do you need this scene? Like, I feel like that process is always like, I wonder if you actually need this scene. It's like, of course we need the scene. This is the best scene. This is the most important scene. And then I go to Drew and I'm like, do you need the scene?
And then we go through the list. Like, did we learn this information somewhere else? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Start to go down the list. You're like, I guess we technically don't need this scene.
Right.
It
So
is.
it's like a humbling process. Like, okay, you're right. We don't need it.
You mentioned like therapy, and I know what it's like being on your side of it, and the director, and like the insecurity that comes from like seeing footage and scenes and feeling like this wasn't, what we intended. And I do feel that's like part of my job, when I feel something is good, to say it, and to like tell a director or tell a showrunner, no, this scene is good and this performance is good. I know it's not what you had in mind, but you should feel good about it for this reason. And I feel like, a lot of directors need to hear that, in TV shows, because they're feeling very insecure, about what they shot. And a lot of times I just feel like, no, like, I know this was hard to shoot and you did a great job, and I feel that's like the personal part of my job, and it also helps like establish a good relationship, so they feel like you appreciate the work that they did, and then maybe they're open to appreciating the work that I did, and then it's like, it's a good back and forth. So I try to be very open with praise, because I feel a lot of editors can be very negative. They only look at what doesn't work. It's like, oh, you screwed up this scene. You didn't get what I needed. Or, I don't know, some editors, I feel, are a little bit bitter. Maybe, it's not their thing. So they are more critical. And I kind of feel like it's important to be the opposite, to really bring like a lot of positivity to the process, because I know what you guys are going through is hard. Like you said, it's like the death process almost, right? So like if I'm also feeling a death process, then we're not having fun, so, I want to bring like a lot of positive energy and say, no, this is good. This is a good episode. We just have a little bit of work to do, and I feel like that's, one of my roles.
Yeah, that sounds so good. Not only emotionally, sorry, Drew, but also creatively, because I feel like that can be so helpful. In any part of the creative process, you just want to do more of the good stuff that's working and less of the bad stuff that's not working at the script level, at whatever level. So I think creatively, that's probably extremely helpful too, to go, these are all the things that are working super well. Yeah. Let's just do more of that. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, because sometimes directors, showrunners, I feel, don't like appreciate what is good about it, and getting sucked into the negativity kind of brings the whole process down and makes everyone feel bad about, what you're doing. And I feel like base level, you asked again, like, what do I wish some showrunners knew about the process? Like, we should be having fun. I mean, we really should be enjoying it. We're going to do better work if we are enjoying the process. That's something I learned early on from, a supervising editor that I work with, this guy, Tim Good, and we were on a show and it was just kind of a disaster. But like, he came in every day with like so much positive energy and we're going to fix this and this is going to be great. And sometimes I was like, you're delusional. This is a disaster. But okay, if you are telling me we're going to have fun today, then I'm going to go with you. Right. That's just always my model of like, okay, no matter how bad things appear, you're going to do better work if you're having fun and if you have a positive attitude and if you appreciate that you get to have this job and work in television. It's all kind of exciting and fun thing to do. So I try to like, as much as possible, like keep that spark going. Obviously, it's hard when people around you are being really negative and kind of bringing you down, but I try to do what I can to like contribute to that.
It's amazing how important what you're saying, just that, you did a good job. This episode is good. We'll get it there. Like just hearing that is, as a showrunner, you can kind of look at another director's work and say, okay, there's some stuff, we'll figure it out. You're just a little less emotionally attached. But if you directed the episode, like I can't tell you how much I've needed that,
right
on day one of the director's cut. Is just that affirmation is so important, because it really is, I love what you're saying, John, too, as being this like, death of the perfect ideal that you had in your mind. It's like a living, breathing thing that is still being raised. It's like having a kid. You think your kid's going to be, when they're an infant, they're going to be a straight A student. They're going to be great at sports. They're going to be, the coolest kid in school. They're going to be all the things. And then time, does its thing. And they're like, okay, well, maybe not, any of those things is perfect, but, this could still be, an absolutely great kid, and that and that might be better.
That might be better.
There is no perfect. There is no perfect episode.
Kid,
are you letting go of your little soccer star? Are you realizing Freddie's should be a ballet star or a soccer star, but probably not both.
Probably not both. To be determined. Yeah, one or the other. Yeah.
She's 2. I think we should mention that she's 2.
Yeah, she's 2. We'll see. Jury is out.
Let's wrap this one up, and then we'll come in for the next.
We're going to come back and talk about tips to fix a broken episode, which I think will be really interesting.
Ooh,
yeah.
If you like our show, please consider taking a moment to subscribe and rate us wherever you get your podcasts, and please tell a friend. That really helps us find our audience.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Rich. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks,
see you on the flip-flop.